Hey, Shalom family, Most High Christ bless. It's Officer Daniela. We're going on part 2 of this series, King Cyrus and the Persian Captivity, right? So we're just going over the history of King Cyrus and why he was very important dealing with our history, right? So here we are in part 2. Let's go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 44, verse 28. That's something I want to touch. We talked about this at part 1, but we're trying to bring it all together, okay? So, Isaiah chapter 44, verse 28. That said of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, thy foundation shall be laid. In part 1, we talked about it in 2 Chronicles, how he allowed us, and in Ezra, we read it in Ezra, how he will allow us to go back, Israel, to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, which we read in 2 Chronicles, that the Babylonians burned down. So, given that account, this is what made King Cyrus great. And we're going to talk about that later on. But Isaiah 44, verse 28 is saying, at the last part of verse 28, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to thy foundation, and to the temple, thy foundation shall be laid. So, in your reference, in your study, in your worksheet, there's a reference. You want to click on the first link, which is Cyrus the Great. We're going to take you on this journey to understand the history, and as it ties to the scriptures. Okay, so this was the prophecy, Isaiah 44 verse 28, chapter 45 verse 1 talks about how great he was going to be, just because of this prophecy, right? So this prophecy had to come into play, and we read that. So let's go to Cyrus the Great, the Wikipedia link, the first link that's in the worksheet, right? We want to scroll all the way down to early life, just to understand the parents of King Cyrus, okay? So early life. Cyrus was born to Cambyses I, king of Ashan, and Mandani, daughter of Astyages, king of Media, during the period of 600 to 599 BC. So King Cyrus was born around 600 599 BC. His father, his name was Cambyses the First, Cambyses I, king of Ashan, right? Then his mother. So his father was a Persian. Let's clear that up. His father was a Persian of Ashan, right? And his mother was the daughter of a king of the Medes, which his name was King Astyages, right? So when you look on your Wikipedia and you read the first sentence, there's a link that sends you to Astyages. This is where we're going to go to, which is the second link in your worksheet, okay? So the father name is Cambyses I, king of Ashan, which was a Persian king. He was a Persian ruler. His mother, Mandani, of King Astyages, which was king of the Medes, right? This is important because this is how the power was transferred over from the Medes over to the Persians, okay? Follow along. It's very important. Cambyses I of Persia, Mandani, daughter of Astyages, King Astyages of the Medes, right? So we want to go to Astyages. You want to click on Astyages, which is going to take you to his Wikipedia, right? And we want to scroll down. We want to scroll down to in Herodias, right? And Herodias is going to give some history of what happened. All right. In Herodias, the account given by the ancient Greek historian Herodias relates that Astyages had a dream in which his daughter, Mandane, gave birth to a son who would destroy his empire, destroy the Medes' empire. So this was prophecy. And he also had it in his dream. If we read Daniel, the Babylonian kings, they were visit in dreams. The prophecies were in dreams, right? So this happened to this king, Astyages. Let me see if I can bring that brightness down. All right, so King Astyages. Let's read it again. Mandane gave birth to a son who would destroy his empire. Fearful of the dream's prophecy, Astyages married her off to Cambyses of Anshan. So this is why the Persians king's daughter was married off. I mean, the Medes, Astyages, the king Astyages, king of the Medes, married his daughter off to the Persians, which actually were under the Medes at that time. But he married her off in fear of his grandson taking over or destroying his empire, which in return did. Right? So, follow along from the top. The account given by the ancient Greek historian Herodias relates that Astyages had a dream in which his daughter, Mandane, gave birth to a son who would destroy his empire. Fearful of the dream's prophecy, Astyages married her off to Cambyses of Anshan, who had a reputation for being a quiet and peaceful prince, and whom Astyages believed to be no threat. So this is why he married her to the Persian king Cambyses I, right? When a second dream warned Astyages of the dangers of Mandane's offspring, Astyages sent his general Harpagus to kill the child Cyrus. Herodias correctly names Cyrus' parents, though he fails to mention that Cambyses was a king. So Cambyses I, he was a king of Assyria, not Assyria, of the Persians, right? He was a king. Herodias correctly named Cyrus' parents, though he fails to mention that Cambyses was a king. Modern scholarship generally rejects his claim that Cyrus was the grandson of Astyages. Harpagus, unwilling to spoil royal blood, gave the infant to a shepherd. So he was ordered, King Astyages ordered Harpagus, his general, to kill Cyrus, his grandson, King Astyages' grandson. He ordered to kill him. His general Harpagus didn't want to kill him, so he gave him off to another family. And later on, he grew as a man. Let's see. I'm trying to bypass all the mumbo jumbo. The next paragraph. Cyrus was raised by the Mithridates' own son, and Harpagus presented the stillborn child to Astyages as the dead Cyrus. So a stillborn is a baby that was that died in the mother's womb and still came out the womb. So he presented another baby that was dead to Astyages. Okay. When Cyrus was found alive at age 10, Astyages spared the boy on the advice of his Maggie, returning him to his parents in Anshan. So when he was 10, Astyages heard of it and allowed him to move back in with his family, because he thought he was dead, but he wasn't. So he moved back in with his family, not knowing that this was going to be his downfall. That was going to be his ruin. Okay. Let's see. Let's keep reading. Let's see. Harpagus, however, did not escape punishment, as Astyages is said to have fed him his own son at a banquet. Cyrus succeeded his father in 559 and in 553 on the advice of Harpagus, who was eager for revenge for being given the abominable supper. Cyrus rebelled against Astyages. So now here it is. Cyrus rebelled against his own grandfather, right? And we're going to read more into that in the next, because this one, it gets weird, right? As as we read along. So the next link that's in your worksheet, is Khan Academy. Click on that, open that up. So this is going to give us some more information about what happened, okay? And it should say the rise of Persia. You want to scroll down just a little bit to creation of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, right? It says in 559 BCE, a man named Cyrus became the leader of Persia. He was the great-great-grandson of the first Persian king, Achaemenid, whose name is why historians call this the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Prior to Cyrus' rule, Persia was a small tributary state to the Median Empire. So once again, Cambyses, his father, and Mandane, his mother, they were over the Persian. They was over the Persian Empire, but they were under the Medes, right? It says, prior to Cyrus' rule, Persia was a small tributary state to the Median Empire, which happened to be ruled by Cyrus' grandfather, Astyages. Persia paid the Medes for protection and to maintain a level of independence. So this is giving you the understanding of the Persian and Medes, how it worked together. The Medes were in power at this time, right? And then the power from the Medes came to the Persians, in which we're going to read. Let's see. Cyrus came into conflict with his grandfather for reasons that are unknown, and initiated a rebellion that ultimately succeeded in 550 BCE. Cyrus commemorated his victory over Astyages by building a city on the site of the battle and naming it Pasargadae after his tribe. By defeating Astyages, Cyrus took on his role as ruler of what had been the Median Empire. Not everyone who had been paying tribute to Astyages accepted Cyrus as their new ruler. However, in order to solidify his power, Cyrus had to find ways to bring lesser rulers under his control. His success earned Cyrus the title Cyrus the Great. So, after defeating his grandfather, Astyages, Cyrus became ruler, the Persian ruler, because his power was under the Persian rule through his father. So now, he's now king over the Median Empire and the Persian Empire. So this is why we, and now how he ruled contributes to our history now. Once again, we read it earlier, Isaiah 44:28, Isaiah 44, we didn't read 45, chapter 45, verse 1, but we read that in part 1. This ties in together now, because the mindset that Cyrus had, this is the reason why we was able to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild, right? So, scroll up a little bit. It says religious toleration and maintaining local traditions. Cyrus was a successful military commander, but he also recognized the need to leave the regions that he conquered in good economic order if they were going to provide him with tribute revenues. So most of these rulers nowadays, these rulers that are set over us, they're mainly worried about money. They're mainly worried about being powerful and continue to stay powerful. So most of the times they will allow stuff for us to do. They'll allow us to give us certain freedom in order for us not to rebel or fight against that ruler. So this is what Cyrus did, which was the prophecy, right? It says good economic order. It said that he conquered in good economic order if they were going to provide him with tribute revenues. So tribute is taxes. We pay taxes today. We pay land tax. We pay taxes when we buy stuff. When we get a paycheck, we have to pay taxes. We always paying taxes. When you buy a car, pay taxes. So on and so forth, right? It's known as tribute, right? To achieve this, Cyrus left local rulers in place after conquering a region, and he allowed the local population to continue practicing their preferred religious traditions. These policies ensured that conquering regions continue to function economically and reduce the chance that they will rebel against him. So, in that, we read that in 2 Chronicles, how he allowed us to come back to rebuild, to do the things that we wanted to do. He actually gave us money in order to do that, right? Which relates to Isaiah 44:28. So let's go to that. 2 Chronicles. We're going to read about that. So now we're going to tie it together. Just because understand, in the Babylonian captivity, we were put to death. If whatever we believed in, whatever we was about, we had to follow under the Babylonian rule. We read that in Daniel, how they were supposed to eat the abominable meats, and they were they were supposed to salute to the statue, and they were thrown into the fire. You read this stuff. This is what was going on in the Babylonian captivity. This was what was going on in the Assyrian captivity. Now, Persian Mede captivity allowed us to believe what we wanted to believe in. We wanted to follow our God, and he allowed us to go back to Jerusalem. I'm saying it, I'm repeating it over and over and over, so we have an understanding. This is what made King Cyrus great, and this is how it ties into our history, right? So, 2 Chronicles chapter 36. Let's see. Let's start with 17. Therefore, he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young men or maiden or old. Let's see. This is in Old English. Let me 1 second. Let me put this in English. All right, verse 17. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 17. And I'm about to wrap it up. All right, here we go. Therefore, he brought upon them the king of Chaldees, who slew their young with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man or him that stooped for age. He gave them all into his hands, and all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and his princes, all these he brought into Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar did not play at all. It was either you was going to serve him, or you was going to be put to death. And he captured us and took us into the land of Babylon. Right? This is why we had to go back into Jerusalem. He burnt down our land. He burnt down the city, and we had to leave and go to Babylon. Right? So this should tie all together now. Right? Verse 18, and all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of the princes, all these he brought to Babylon. And they burnt the house of God, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the places thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. Right? This is the difference between Babylon and Persian Mede, and this is why King Cyrus was considered great. This is why they call him great. The historians call him great, but we just know him as King Cyrus, right? But he's in our history because of us because he granted us freedom to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild our temple. This is why it ties together. All right. Verse 20. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the king of Persia, which is King Cyrus. Verse 21. To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed their Sabbaths, for as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years, 10 years. That is 70 years, right? 70 is 60 plus 10 makes it 70 years. Verse 22. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, after he defeated his grandfather Astyages, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it in writing, saying, Thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth had the Lord God of heaven given me, and he had charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem. This is what we read in Isaiah 44:28, right? We read this. And he had charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah, who is there among you of all his people. The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Right? So now this was the prophecy being put into play. Now when you read Ezra and you read Nehemiah, this is now us going back to Jerusalem, rebuilding and going through the troubles of rebuilding the temple and rebuilding the walls. Ezra and Nehemiah is a pivotal, is very important to understand. And Ezra and Nehemiah took place in the Persian captivity, right? So make sure that you have taken good notes, because we're going to go over the worksheet, and make sure that, we're following along, because like I said, though he's from another nation, we have to understand why and how King Cyrus ties in to our history, right? I hope y'all learned something. And with that, I say shalom.